Well, I'm very excited to introduce the man who came up with this idea, by the way, who we haven't over 3 years interviewed, which is madness, isn't it? Anyway, we've got Jonathan Green. Hello, Jonathan. How are you?
Hello. Yes, I'm all right, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Good to see you. Now, Jonathan, you have quite an illustrious career in game books, going way back to, well, what was the first one you wrote for? Was it Fighting Fantasy you wrote for
The
first?
first one I wrote was for Fighting Fantasy. It was number 53 of the original run, called Spellbreaker, and it was published in 1993. So next year will be my 30th anniversary as a published author.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how did that come about? You must have been three.
Not quite, not quite. Um, I was the perfect age for Fighting Fantasy when they were first published. So I was 10 years old, almost 11, about to go to secondary school. I was an only child, so I'd sort of occupy myself most of the time anyway. I was literate. Um, and when I first picked up the Wall of Far Top Mountain in Waterstones in Bath, it's like nothing I'd ever seen before. And I was hooked. So it wasn't very long before I started trying to write my own adventures. And my uh, teacher in the second form of senior school, so what they've now called year 8, even wrote in my report that during sort of form time I'd be creating these adventures, but they were very different from actual books, more drawing than writing at that point. But yeah, it never left me. So other friends of mine kind of moved away from the game book craze and went on to other things, and I just kept plugging away. And eventually, when I was about to leave school, I wrote to Puffin saying, how do you go about writing a game book for you? And they could have just ignored me, but I got a letter back from Mark Gascoigne, who was the consultant editor at the time, telling me what they needed, and that was 100 sample sections written up as the final adventure, the rest of the adventure plotted out, any special rules, any particular cool monsters, and submit it. So as soon as I left school, finished my A-levels, I sat down and started to write what was called The Outlaws of Calm, and submitted it. Mark gave me very kind feedback, but it obviously wasn't good enough. I had another go, and again, it didn't really get much better. So I then put it to one side, and after my first year at uni, I then sat down and had a go at a completely different idea, which is what became Spellbreaker. And move on another
Yeah.
year, end of my second year at uni, I got my commission to write my first
Yes.
book.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah.
And that's amazing. And did you um, did you kind of meet Ian and Steve and uh,
No. So I met, after having got one published, I then managed to get on sort of the group who are kind of producing one each year. So there are a few of us. So for about 3 years, I did one of them each year. So Carl Sargent was still writing at the time as Keith Martin. Paul Mason was writing them as well. I think Robin Waterfield did one. So yeah, so they're a small group of us at the time. So I was one of those contributors. And I didn't actually meet Steve and Ian until much later, but I did meet Mark Gascoigne because when I was leaving uni, it was like, well, I want to try and be a writer. So I thought about, rather than just live at home, I thought, I've got to make my own way in the world. So I actually moved to Nottingham because Mark implied that there might be some work at Games Workshop. So I also ended up doing color text for them, so which was the short stories in their rule books, which gave particular flavor to an army or a character or an event. And of course, in those stories, the army that the book is about, they're always the guys who are going to win. And because I was there, I then got involved in writing things for Inferno magazine, which was Black Library short story magazine collection. And from there moved on to writing novels for the Black Library as well. So yeah, I didn't meet Stephen until I think I met Ian in 2009. And Steve must have been around the same time, but at completely different occasions and places.
wow, fantastic. And how many books did you end up writing for Fighting Fantasy?
So I did 3 for Puffin. And I then did another 4 when Wizard Books were publishing them. So yeah, 7 altogether. Yeah.
Wow. And which one of those is your proudest achievement? Is there one that really kind of sticks out as like, oh, I aced it on that one?
Well, there's two, I suppose. And part of it is when I started writing them, I wasn't playing the books fairly myself. So I was trying to write a book that would beat cheaters like me, forgetting that most people just want to enjoy the book. If they want to cheat, it probably means they're enjoying the story, and it's up to them anyway. So with the naivety of youth, the first three that I wrote are really hard. Blood Bones was a weird one because I'd actually written it for Puffin Books, but it hadn't been published by then. So I rewrote it slightly for Wizard. But from then on, when I got new commissions, I thought, okay, I need to make these books fair first and foremost, at least try to. And then people can decide whether they want to play them fairly or not. So the first of those was Howl of the Werewolf, which also was taking a creature which obviously loads of movies and novels about werewolves, but in game books, there's always this weird counter during the night, like you hear something and you meet a werewolf. And I thought you can really make them the big bad, like Carl Sargent had done with vampires. And then the last one I wrote, which is for Wizard, was Night of the Necromancer. So that one started where all the others end. So right at the start of the book, your character's killed and you come back as a ghost and you have to solve your own murder. So those two, I feel.
Oh, cool.
And I think the readers agree.
Fantastic. That's great. I don't think I'll have to read that one. I love that kind of premise. And from there, what's the first thing you did that wasn't fighting fantasy after that?
Well, I suppose the first things were Games Workshop, variously novels, short stories, comic strips, color text for rule books. I'm trying to think the order of events now, but I suppose actually, because I moved to Nottingham, I ended up co-writing two Sonic the Hedgehog game books with Mark Gascoigne. So they were for Puffin as well, but it wasn't fighting fantasy. So that was a different experience of writing for like an established IP. Really, with that, Mark and I plotted them out together. I then wrote the game book structure and he added all the jokes and Sonic-fied everything.
Cool.
But then from there, I started doing, well, having written novels for Games Workshop, I then created a series of novels for the Pax Britannia Steampunk series for Rebellion for their Abaddon Books imprint. And just because of then you get involved with a different company, they also published 2000 AD. So I wrote Judge Dredd short stories. Around a similar time, I actually approached Puffin Books again about writing some Doctor Who game books and was lucky to get a few things published under that IP. And then because I'd done that for them, they asked me to do some for Star Wars. So it quite often works that you'll sometimes come up with the ideas yourself, and then publishers or editors who know that you've done certain things will ask you to do things for them as well.
And then you went on to create sort of Ace Gamebooks and start. Oh, I don't. Maybe you didn't.
Yeah,
a missing period.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. One of the things I did for Abaddon Books was I wrote a short story within the Pax Britannia setting, effectively about a weird kind of computer-generated experience that the main character has, but based on Alice in Wonderland. And having done that, I thought I could do more with this. And I thought it would be quite fun to do an Alice game book where you guide Alice through Wonderland. And things, obviously, you'd meet all the characters you'd expect, but there would be certain twists. So if you knew the story, it wouldn't necessarily turn out as you're expecting. So it wasn't called Ace Game Books at all then. I just wrote this Alice's Nightmare in Wonderland, and Snow Books published it. They published my histories of fighting fantasy game books by then. And because it was Alice, I had her stats in the game are agility, logic, insanity, combat, and endurance, because they spell out Alice. But I also thought, because it's Alice in Wonderland, as well as having dice, you should be able to use playing cards. So I had an alternative rule set where you use playing cards instead of dice. And then I thought, well, this is kind of a thing now. And people said to me, what are you going to do next? Alice Through the Looking Glass. And it's not a major spoiler, but that's all covered in Alice's Nightmare in Wonderland. And I thought, what else could I do that's similar? So I then thought, well, there's the Wicked Wizard of Oz, and Peter Pan. And Peter Pan is the one of those which I actually like the least. So I added dinosaurs, because everything's better with dinosaurs. So it's Peter Pan meets the Lost World, and it's called Neverland, Here Be Monsters. And then obviously by that point, it had become a thing. So then, and the theme was that they were all based on existing properties out of copyright, but that I could adapt or tweak or just have a bit of fun with.
Yeah, and it seems like you have been having an awful lot of fun with them. And
Yes,
I love the artwork that you've been using for them as well. It's very evocative, and especially the Alice ones are really striking. I believe there's a colouring book from that as well.
there is. Yeah, and it's done crazily well, particularly in the States. I think at one point it was number 58 in all books on Amazon. So it did far better than the game book,
Brilliant.
and it still sells, which is nice. So
That's
Kevin
fantastic.
Crossley did the art for the book. So he and I both get the royalties from that one together. But yeah,
That's
that's
great.
quite a nice little earner. Yeah, I mean, I'm fortunate because of my background in fighting fantasy that I've met and worked with some fantastic artists, people like Tony Huff, the late Martin McKenna. And so I could contact these people and say, would you illustrate my game book? Because although I'm not an artist of their caliber, I'm good enough to know what I want. So I think I'm not a bad art
Yeah.
director, but I'm very hot on matching the artist to the project. So the fourth Ace game book is Beowulf Beast Slayer, and that one actually got Russ Nicholson, who illustrated the Warlock of Firetop Mountain, amongst others, to do the illustrations, which was amazing. And then Tony, who I'd worked with on a couple of fighting fantasy books, he illustrated Twas the Krampus Night Before Christmas. And from that, we've actually turned that into a role-playing game. And he's been the sole
Oh,
illustrator on that
which I
line.
have as well. It's,
Yes, yes. And it's nice because that could be color. So you get to see his fantastic art in color rather than just grayscale.
yeah, they seem to be sort of more than game books. They seem to have this extra dimension. I feel these IP. I don't want to call them IP ones because they're more than that. But I think it's partly because
I
of the
think you're right.
artists
I
you're
mean, that,
using and the little extra bits that you add into it.
yeah, I mean, it is a conscious decision on my part. But because there's only me writing all this stuff, it takes time. Um, but yeah, having started from the game books, I'm keen to do role-playing games. I've actually done. It's not ready yet because it needs some tweaks. But we've done a card game linked to Twas very loosely. Well, I say we. I have, and it's getting Tony to do some more up for that. Um, and yeah, I've got ideas for board games, possibly doing some novel adaptations, but all sorts of things. But it always starts with the game book.
Brilliant. You missed out Dracula, one of your most
I
popular
have,
ones.
yes, yeah, that was yeah, it's up on my shelf. I don't know if you can see them there.
Yeah,
It's
I can,
ridiculously
it's a
large.
meaty tomb, isn't
It's
it? Yes. No,
yeah,
it's a
it's the
beautiful book.
longest game book I've. Well, thank you. It's the longest game book I've ever written, and it's 1,000 sections long. It's about, I think, about 170,000 words. So if you think of a typical fighting fantasy game book, it's about 4 of those. But part
Yeah.
of the thing with the Ace game books line is not all the books, but in many of them, you can play as different characters from the story, and it will change as you do that. So the first one I did that with was The Wicked Wizard of Oz. And Dracula, it just seemed like a great opportunity. So you can play, because if you know the original novel, Bram Stoker's novel, it's Epistolarian style. And you only get the whole story because you read bits of Jonathan Harker's diary and Mina Murray's diary and
Mm.
Dr. Seward's notes, which he records on his phonograph. So I've taken that approach. So you can play as any of those 3 characters. But the different thing I've done with this one is you can chop and change which character you are during the adventure, which I haven't done before. And what the other characters do does make a difference. So if you change your characters, they're more likely to survive, but then you're also more likely to do more things which will alert Dracula to the fact that you're after him. So he'll then send
Yeah.
more of his minions to stop you. But I also thought it's too good an opportunity to miss. So you can play the adventure as Dracula himself. And that one starts in the
Oh,
15th
brilliant.
century before he's even a vampire. So,
Wow.
yeah.
That's
And then
amazing.
the
How
latest
long did
one,
that one take you to write? I'll
good
get
point.
to your
That one
latest,
I
but
wrote in lockdown. Yeah, yeah. So no, that was in lockdown. I can't remember exactly how long it took, but I suppose I was working on it for the best part of a year, on and off. Yeah,
Yeah, brilliant. So, yes, your latest one, please.
yeah. So
You
this
wearing
is
the
a bit
t-shirt,
different because although well, I know, very unsubtle product placement. So it's Ronin 47. So it's based on the legend of the 47 Ronin, so the historical event from 17th century, 18th century Japan. I'm trying to remember now. I do know because it is in the back of the book. But this is the first time I thought I wanted to do something that wasn't a Western story. That was an intentional thing to begin with. And then I thought, I know I'm trying to turn it into fantasy adventure, but anything I did with Ronin, I thought it's just too much like 47 Ronin, Keanu Reeves film. I couldn't sort of get far enough away from that. And I thought that would be obvious comparisons. And then another aspect of Japanese culture that I enjoy are all the giant monster movies, like the original Godzilla, and all their giant robots. As you know, people like Guillermo del Toro brought into the Western culture with Pacific Rim and similar. So I thought instead I would do the very loose plot of The Legend of the 47 Ronin as a science fiction novel in which you are the pilot of one of these mechs. So you still have the whole betrayal story from the original Legend, and the names of the characters are the same. The overarching plot is the same. But then it's set against a background of it's 100 years in the future. The apocalypse has been and gone, as in the natural world, and it's climate disaster and the rest of it. So the world's populated by giant hyper-evolved kaiju, and you are pilot of one of the robots sent to, well, you have to fight them to manage so that humanity can survive. But then obviously things go wrong, you're betrayed, and you set off after the traitor.
Fantastic. I seem to remember there was an 80s film which had, I can't remember what it's called, BattleTech.
There's all sorts. Yeah, BattleTech. I'm guessing there's been movies, but that's certainly a tabletop miniatures game. But I tried to veer away from that and keep it more Japanese in style. So the other thing that makes this really different is the art is by Neil Googe, who's a comic book artist traditionally, and he illustrates. He does quite a lot of work for 2000 AD in the UK, but he's also drawn characters like Wonder Woman and the Flash for DC Comics. And then the colors on the cover were done by an American artist called Len O'Grady. And the thing which makes Ronin different from the other ones is that the hardback edition, which has that rather fantastic silver foil cover,
beautiful,
is full color. So the illustrations have all been colored. So any illustration that appears in the paperback version is in color in the hardback. So I was really pleased with that. It was quite an epic task, but there's your mech, the one in the middle. It's a samurai class robot fighting some monsters. So
cool.
It's full of great stuff like that.
And who's publishing that one?
So that's Snowbooks. Yeah, they published all the Ace Game books in the UK. So I have to say I'm very fortunate in that they have been picked up by foreign publishers as well. So I think Alice is now available. Sorry.
And is Ronin going to be available in Japan?
I hope so, but that's not definite yet. But yeah, that would be great. But yeah, Alice, I think, is available in about 10 different countries around the world now.
Fantastic.
It's in like 9 different languages.
That's amazing. I'm going to talk to you a little bit. Oh, actually, future project. I know you don't want to give too much away, but how many projects have you got coming up in the next couple of years?
Oh, you put me on the spot now. I'd say at least 6 different things. Not all Ace Game books, but I mean, I'm doing a new edition of You Are the Hero, which is a history of fighting fantasy game books. Because I ran the Kickstarter for that 10 years ago, actually, and people still contact me saying, "Have you got copies of that?" Because it's out of print. And I did a follow-up volume in 2017, and again, that's out of print. So it's going to combine elements of those 2 books, but also with new content to bring it up to the 40th anniversary, which is this year in a couple of weeks.
Brilliant.
Well, in fact, a week after this goes out, because of course this is going out on the 40th anniversary of the publication of the Warlock of Far Mountain. Yes. So that's one of the projects I've announced. I thought I knew which the next Ace Game book was going to be, but I think I might have changed my mind. I certainly want to do one that the short title, because the long one is ridiculous, but the short title is Judgment Day 1869. And it's an original story, but it features characters from Mark Twain's novels. So you've got the sheriff, Tom Sawyer, and the outlaw Huckleberry Finn, amongst others. So that would be a weird Western. But then I may bump it to do something else first, which I've not announced yet. But yes, I would say, and then I've got coming out later this year, there's Herot, the role-playing game, which is set in the same world as Beowulf Beast Slayer.
Of course,
I've
yes.
got some other projects for other publishers. Yeah, so plenty going on.
Busy, busy, busy. That's fantastic. And it sounds like you've still
Always.
got loads more you want to do. In fact, you just started, John, really, haven't you? You're
Well,
young
I
man.
did
Got
make a list of all the things I'd like to do at Ace Gamebooks, and I've already got a list of about 20 different stories I'd like to do. But
wow,
I never like doing the same thing over and over again. There always has to be something different. So yeah, anyway, we'll see how it all works out.
that's exciting. Now, John, I think most people watching will know how to get hold of you. But for those who do not, where can they go to get your books? How can they follow you? I think you've got a blog as well, haven't you?
Okay, I have. Yeah, my website's jonathangreenauthor.com, which is my blog. I've also got an acegamebooks.com separate site, and there's links to all the different books. With that one, you also have links to download extras. So for example, unfortunately, no matter how many times we play test them, errata always slip in. So until we can reprint and update, I do post a list of errata that you can pick up for free from that. You can download adventure sheets for the game books for free so that you don't have to write in the book. Again, through Amazon, any sort of online bookstore. And I'm on Twitter at Jonathan Green, Instagram at John Green 71, and I'm on Facebook as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, John. Thank you so much, John. Thank you for organising this as well. International Game Book Day will be back next year, I'm
Oh,
sure. And thank
yes.
you again for creating it. And hopefully we all see you at the Fighting Fantasy Fest.
Well, thank you for all
Wonderful.
your hard work as well with the interviews. And yeah, see you there.
Pleasure. Pleasure. Thank you.